when my wife looked at me across our kitchen island and said, "The only real mistake I ever made was putting on this wedding ring." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam a door. She said it calmly, almost thoughtfully, like she had rehearsed it in her head 100 times, before finally letting it breathe. We'd been married for 7 years in a quiet suburb outside Chicago, 2 cars in the driveway, a golden retriever named Max, joint bank accounts, shared passwords, and a calendar full of family obligations. On the outside, we looked like one of those stable American couples who had figured it out. Inside, things had been colder for a while, not explosive, not dramatic, just distant. Conversations turned into logistics. Date nights turned into scrolling on separate couches. Intimacy turned into routine. But even with all that distance, I never believed she regretted me. Regretted us? Maybe during a fight. But regretted marrying me? That was nuclear. I remember the hum of the refrigerator being louder than her voice after she said it. I remember noticing how her coffee mug had a tiny crack near the handle. I remember feeling like something invisible inside my chest had shifted permanently. I didn't shout. I didn't ask her to explain. I simply looked down at my wedding ring, the same one I'd slipped on during a beach ceremony in Santa Monica while our friends cheered and the Pacific wind tried to steal her veil. I twisted the ring slowly, slid it off, and placed it on the counter between us. If wearing it was a mistake, I said evenly, then maybe taking it off is the correction. For the first time that evening, her composure cracked. "What are you doing?" she asked, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. I grabbed my keys, walked past the family photos lining the hallway, and stepped into the cold night air, realizing something important. A man can survive criticism, stress, even emotional distance, but being told he was a life mistake rewires him. I didn't go to a bar. I didn't call a friend to vent. I drove aimlessly along Lakeshore Drive, the city lights reflecting on the water like a reminder that life keeps moving no matter what collapses inside your home. For years, I had quietly adjusted myself to keep the peace, working longer hours. When she wanted more financial security, attending social events I didn't care about because they mattered to her career, networking, shelving my plan to start my own business because stability felt safer for us. I had convinced myself that compromise was love, that endurance was strength. But her sentence echoed over and over. The only mistake was putting on this ring. By the time I parked near a late-night coffee shop, something in me had settled, not anger, not revenge, but clarity. I realized I had been living like a man grateful to be chosen, instead of a man confident in his own worth. So I did something small but symbolic. I downloaded a dating app, not because I was ready to replace her, not because I wanted to cheat, but because I needed proof that I wasn't invisible, that outside the narrative of being someone's regret, I still existed. Within an hour, I matched with someone named Rachel, divorced, marketing executive. Straightforward bio that read, "No games, no drama, just honesty." When she asked why I was on the app, I didn't fabricate a heroic story. I told her the truth. My wife told me marrying me was a mistake tonight. There was a pause before her reply appeared. "Then she clearly doesn't understand your value." It was a simple sentence from a stranger, but it landed harder than anything my wife had said in months. We agreed to meet for coffee the next evening. I didn't hide it. I didn't sneak around. When I walked back into the house later that night, my wife was sitting at the dining table, my ring still resting exactly where I had left it, as if it were evidence in a trial neither of us had prepared for. "You misunderstood me," she said immediately, her voice trembling in a way that hadn't happened earlier. "I didn't mean you were the mistake. I meant I feel lost. I feel like I rushed into marriage before I knew myself." I listened carefully, noticing how her explanation shifted the focus from regret about me to confusion about herself. "But you said putting on the ring was the mistake," I replied calmly. "That ring represents me." Tears filled her eyes, and she stood up, walking toward me like proximity could undo language. "Are you going somewhere tomorrow?" she asked suddenly. I held her gaze. "Yes." The single word seemed to knock the air out of her. "With who?" she pressed. "That's not your concern right now," I answered. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. For years, I had explained myself, reassured her, justified my tone, my schedule, my intentions. This time, I refused to scramble for approval. That night, she barely slept. I could hear her shifting in bed while I stared at the ceiling, thinking about how many American marriages quietly erode not because of infidelity or abuse, but because appreciation fades into assumption. The next evening, I met Rachel at a modern cafe downtown. She was confident without being arrogant, attentive without being intrusive. She asked about my career, my interests, my goals, the kind of questions that had disappeared from my marriage. When I spoke, she listened, not waiting for her turn to talk. There was no physical line crossed, no dramatic betrayal. It was simply coffee, conversation, laughter that didn't feel forced. And in that simple interaction, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Chosen. Not tolerated. Not managed. Chosen. It wasn't about her being better than my wife. It was about realizing I had been shrinking myself to maintain a relationship where my presence had become background noise. When I returned home, the house felt heavier, as if it sensed a shift in power dynamics. My wife was sitting in the same chair, but her posture was different, less defensive, more uncertain. The ring was still on the table, but now looked smaller, almost fragile. "Did you go?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I answered. Her jaw tightened. Was she pretty? It was such a human question, vulnerable and competitive at the same time. "That's not the point," I said. "The point is that someone out there saw me as an opportunity, not a mistake." That sentence broke something open in her. She started crying, not dramatically, but deeply, the kind of cry that comes from fear of loss, rather than anger. "I was frustrated," she admitted. "I felt disconnected. I thought maybe if I said something extreme, you'd react. You'd fight for us." I almost laughed at the irony. You don't motivate someone to fight for a marriage by telling them they ruined your life, I replied. You motivate them by reminding them they matter. Silence filled the space between us, but it wasn't empty. It was reflective. For the first time in a long time, we weren't arguing to win. We were confronting the truth. We had both allowed comfort to replace intention. She had taken my steadiness for granted. I had accepted emotional crumbs in exchange for stability. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered finally. And for the first time, I believed her fear was real. Not because I had threatened divorce, not because I had yelled, but because she realized I had options, and more importantly, I knew it. Over the next few weeks, everything shifted, not magically, not perfectly, but intentionally. She suggested counseling before I did. She initiated difficult conversations instead of avoiding them. She asked about my ambitions, even encouraging me to revisit the business idea I had shelved years ago. Effort replaced assumption. Accountability replaced defensiveness. And I kept my ring off during that time, not as punishment, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a reminder that marriage is not ownership. It is a daily decision. In America, we romanticize grand gestures, proposals on stadium screens, anniversary trips to Hawaii, but the real test of commitment happens in kitchens on ordinary Tuesday nights when frustration tempts us to say words we can't retract. One evening, about a month later, she placed the ring gently in my palm and said, "I don't want you to wear this out of habit. I want you to wear it because you still choose me." I studied her face, searching for traces of pride or ego. I found none, only humility. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the ring back onto my finger. Not because I was afraid of being alone, not because I doubted I could find someone else, but because I saw genuine effort and remembered that love, when rebuilt with awareness, can be stronger than love that never faced a fracture. She once said wearing that ring was her biggest mistake. Now, she understands something deeper. The real mistake would have been assuming I had nowhere else to go. And the greatest lesson we both learned is this: respect is the foundation of attraction. Appreciation is the oxygen of commitment. And the moment you treat your partner like a regret, you risk watching them rediscover their worth without you.